Improvisation Center is back, still in London, and this time our last stop on the London tour is at the National Army Museum, which obviously would be signified by a huge friggin' tank. So yep, Army Museum, last stop, we're going inside. Let's go. Yep, inside the War Museum here, get to see some interesting information about the military. Communications, the importance of all the different roles in military movement. The equipment and everything, even motorcycles, which obviously have been used for the longest time. ATVs. This particular group called the Royal Signals, they deal with communications and any kind of warfare dealing with comms, and of course nowadays cyber warfare. They play that head role in that game. They work on all communications related issues, equipment, you name it. Here we get to look at the origins of the Army, which according to some of this information came about because of political upheavals, civil war, other internal strife that would warrant creating a standing army. And we got some old equipment that would have been used, different armor, flintlock rifled pistol, 1645, a rifling of a pistol or a rifle barrel. That's kind of ahead of its time because they stuck with smoothbores for a good while. So to have a rifled firearm that far back, that's innovative. People's reservations about having a standing army go far back before the American Revolution and the Constitution and all that. A lot of people had issues with having a standing army, probably for obvious reasons. But after all the internal issues they had, it was determined that they needed to form one. And so they did. We got some more equipment right here. Bayonet. Grenades, which are pretty much a little sphere filled with gunpowder and a fuse. Dragoon carbine, 1690, flintlock. Yeah, during the 17th century, the debates about funding and controlling the armies caused a civil war. The Redcoats secured victory for Parliament in the war, formed in 1645. It was a new model army as stated. This new model army was used to restore King Charles II to the throne in 1660, showing the perks of having a standing army. And Charles' brother and successor, King James II, expanded the army even more in order to hold on to power even better. And then, of course, religion came into play because they were afraid of the king Catholicizing the army, which caused him being exiled in 1688's Glorious Revolution. And the army was pretty much rebuilt from there. And of course, it was just in time to fight against the exiled King James II and the French. King William III wanted to stop the French from taking over everything, so That's where the Army came in. And in 1689, Parliament introduced a Bill of Rights which stated that without its consent, a standing army was illegal. So they had control over the army as far as maintaining it and funding it. 1689 settlement freed the army from domestic politics and allowed it to focus on its growing overseas role. Of course, that's where it comes into the colonies. As years progressed, we have a shamshir belonging to Emperor Napoleon I, 1809, and a bloodstained coat worn at Waterloo, Sir Thomas Harris. Another case, we have a French 70 caliber musket surrendered at Fishguard in Wales. Cache used by Jacobite, 1715. A glass, a grenadier cap, a knapsack, pattern 1856 Snyder short rifle. Teddy bear coat. It's cool. Got some more memorabilia right here. In particular, an Indian Army pioneer sword that also doubles as a saw. Kind of a funky tool. Utilitarian and murderous. Little chainmail helmet. More guns. 1896 7mm Mauser. A homemade Mau rifle. Interesting. That looks super sketchy. It's got a little spring firing pin that just looks like it was clapped together, firing a rifle round. That is super sketchy. That's insane. I wouldn't even trust that. Of course, the British Army had to be ready for just about anything. They played roles in the Falklands, the First Gulf War, Second Gulf War, and the years after that in Iraq, Afghanistan. And then, of course, they had to go on the front lines during both world wars and in other theaters of the world, wherever they had colonial interests. Because obviously where you have colonies, you have people who don't want you to be there, so you got to defend your colonies. That's where the Army came in. Like Australasia, India especially, Africa. The British Army had to be ready at a moment's notice to go wherever they were called. Got several different medals that are awarded to different people for different roles. Like this fellow right here who sacrificed himself after an IRA bomb. After an IRA bomb was tossed into a police station, and he shielded civilians with himself. Of course, you got the Victoria Cross, the highest award for gallantry in battle. Many different types of medals were issued. This fellow here was part of the West India Regiment. During a short time, they did buy Creole and African slaves, but after the end of the slave trade in 1807, all those soldiers were declared freemen. And they still served with the Army until it was disbanded in 1927. So the British were before us on abolishing slavery. Interesting, ain't it? Got some more guns here. A Ross 1910 and 303 inch. Apparently it was too brittle for, or delicate for trench warfare, so it was replaced by the SMLE Enfield rifle. And of course you have a, what they call it, a musketoon. Looks like a blunderbuss though. Little short-barreled musket or shotgun or whatever you want to put in there. You got a kukri, curved fighting knife. Useful little tool, ain't it? We also have some more uniform jackets. We have models of the different groups of army. You got your infantry from back then all the way going into the 20th century. Then you have your cavalry, which are the horse-mounted guys. Obviously, these guys played a role all the way into World War I as tanks and armored cars came into play. More of them down here, as stated. Once motorized equipment came into play, horses were phased out. Of course, you have your artillery, which in the same situation, horses played a role until motorized equipment came into play to move heavy guns around. Logistics, same thing. Horses and carriages played a role until motorized equipment came around. Same thing with engineers, medical, and even the staff. Once motorized equipment came into play, there was no need for all the horses. Universal carrier, basically a class of armored cars that were used for transporting soldiers and light weapons, machine guns, mortars, you name it. Even flamethrowers were mounted on these things. They were basically a utilitarian jack-of-all-trades tracked vehicle. Pretty cool. Be fun to have one around the farm, don't you think? Would make getting through muddy areas a breeze. Of course, with a standing army, you need soldiers to fill that standing army. And all means of getting people to join were used. Coercion, you know, you trick them into joining for whatever reason, whatever way, all the way to propaganda posters convincing people to join because they can get to see the world, or your country needs you, or offering jobs and money and you name it, just like the U.S. Army. Convince people in any way, shape, or form to join so you can get as many people as possible. All the way up to, of course, drafting if they are not voluntarily joining, which was the case in World War I and World War II, obviously. So, yeah, luckily things aren't bad now as they were back then to warrant drafting, because if that was the case, a lot of people would probably be draft dodging. Of course, joining the Army required all kinds of training, physical and mental, obviously. Had to be in shape. Couldn't be huge, couldn't be out of shape. Of course, there were also disciplinary things, like keeping hair trimmed. Only certain people were allowed to wear beards and mustaches. Hair had to be combed, you had to be kept tidy. Even the women that were playing auxiliary roles had to be kept prim and proper. You couldn't just be a slovenly soldier, bad for discipline. Even the meals were limited, and in some cases education was somewhat limited. And again, like I say, physical training was a must. Soldiers had to stay in shape, because a fat, sloppy soldier is a bad soldier. Can't have a soldier that can't have the endurance necessary to fight through any situation. Of course, you had training time with the different guns of the time, like the Brown Bess musket, used in 1727, up to 10 weeks training time. Martini Henry, a falling block rifle, breech loader from 1875, around 12 weeks. Short magazine Enfield in 1913, around 26 weeks. And the regular, well, it's not a regular, it's a little bit shorter, but a 1940 SMLE, around 18 weeks training. I like Enfields. They're pretty smooth action, actually. Got a Bren light machine gun, 1954, about 10 weeks training. SA-80 bullpup rifle, 14 weeks training. Even while in the barracks or in training, you had to keep your equipment nice and clean. All part of the discipline. As a soldier, you eat, sleep, and shit Army. Of course, now it's a little bit more lenient. You get to have your family on base and everything, live in separate housing. Wasn't always like that, though. Of course, a lot of the stuff that one would use in the barracks or in the Army camps is synonymous to what you might use on a camping trip. Everything from water filtration equipment, compasses, camp toilets and furniture. Other little kits, hygiene kits and whatnot, cooking kits, even solar showers, all kinds of stuff. Basically the same stuff we would use for camping would have been used in military camps in the field. Of course, part of the discipline as a soldier was knowing how to pack your bag, because, well, once you're in the field, whatever you had on you is all you had. There was no going to Walmart or Academy or any store to get more equipment or ammunition. If you needed it, you better have it on you before you leave base or you're SOL. Even back then, same thing. Whether it was primitive guns and technology or modern guns and technology and equipment, you better pack everything you need now or you're gonna do without. Of course, in the camp, you had different little things you could take advantage of, like drinking. In the case of our alcohol or liqueur set, or these elephant tusk smoking apparatus. They, of course, chewed snuff a lot. Of course, they had their allotments of foods. Of course, nowadays you have MREs, but back then you had other crappy rations like hardtack or even just carry on. You know, if you could hunt an animal or whatever, cool. Sometimes they brought animals with them. Sometimes they have to live off the land. Whatever works. You had all the camp equipment. Like I say, everything was synonymous to what we would use in a camping trip. Little gas stoves and cookware and whatnot. All compact, ready to move at a moment's notice. Even a cool little wood burning stove right here. Even in the military, there were roles that people can learn to fill that didn't involve killing people, such as saving people in the case of medical professionals, which, you know, it's one place to really learn the medical profession. If you don't have the money to go to medical school, join the military and you can learn a whole lot about the medical profession. Got a nice little armored car right here. Armored cars, basically a little light tank. Another cool little vehicle. Of course, soldiers were not immune from getting into trouble for any given reason, and back then they would literally whip the crap out of you by flogging. But capital punishment, the death penalty, wasn't used. It was used all the way up to around 1942. The last one that was done, even though it technically wasn't abolished until 1998, long after it was abolished for civilians in the UK. Of course, one of the sad realities of war is serious injury, which we've seen during the Gulf Wars and Iraq War, Afghanistan War, with a lot of soldiers being dismembered and requiring prosthetics once they came home. And along with physical impact was psychological impact, with PTSD being a serious issue, more so than physical injury. So, unfortunately, soldiers really didn't get as much care and concern and treatment after they actually played their roles on the battlefield. Kind of a sad case. Some soldiers were lucky enough to be able to make it back into the real world intact physically and mentally, where they can go back into civilian society and play a productive role as a civilian, and not resort to having to live off the streets because, well, their psychological and physical issues prevented them from being productive citizens. Got to do more for these guys, especially the ones that really paid some serious prices. We actually have us a rifled muzzle-loading gun, 16-pounder, 1872. Of course, way back then, a couple 100+ years ago, the British were not always our friends, as indicated with the Revolution and the War of 1812. Decisive battles were fought. New Orleans, different points, going through Canada. While the British were trying to stop the French, we were fighting the British once again. We got some guns right here. 65 caliber, .65 inch Indian contract pistol, flintlock. Have a 1866 Spencer 50 caliber repeating rifle. Pretty cool little setup. Get a better angle there of it. There we go. And of course, the British had their hands full with Native American Indians just as well as with the Americans, as well as through the Caribbean. Anywhere the British had colonies and other rebellious peoples nearby, they had to do a little fighting. Looking at a lot of these placards and pictures of paintings here. Fort Royal, Guadalupe, 1759. Like I say, they played a role in India for quite some time, through the 1700s, 1800s, all the way into the 20th century. Things weren't always peaceful either. Some Indians fought alongside the British, some did not. Of course, I've always got to enjoy looking at the guns of the time, like this flintlock from 1779, as well as the different blades that were used. We have another one right here, a flintlock smoothbore musket, short barrel unit, 1801.
Especially when you have to go out trench digging with arms and 70 rounds of ball cartridge. Private Samuel Smith,
Model of a cannon.
1882.
A depressing gun carriage. It could be lowered down at a downward angle to shoot from a higher position. Looking right here, you have what almost looks like a double-barreled shotgun, but it's actually a 73 caliber musket, which for all intents it could serve as a shotgun because, well, 73 caliber is about 12 gauge. You also have Maxim 303 machine gun right here. 1896 machine gun.
They can drive it
One of the
through
first.
at 40
Well,
paces.
before after the Gatling gun, of course.
Nearly within spear range.
You have another Martini Henry rifle.
Forward, sway their body from side to side
To make their adversary doubt.
You have this funny looking rifle right here. An Afghani Jazale. Not sure how to pronounce that. But it's an interesting looking flintlock. And you have a smoothbore 65 caliber percussion pistol used by the Indian cavalry. Looking at more uniforms. We have us a Mauser rifle sitting right here. 1896 8mm Mauser. Got more uniforms. There were conflicts in Afghanistan between India and Afghanistan, from what I'm gathering here. And of course, the British played a role in the Korean War, even in the first Gulf War, part of the coalition, as we could see with all the equipment here. The British fought alongside the U.S. and the rest of the NATO allies in just about every conflict after World War II. Obviously, during World War II, Britain played a vital role in the African and European, Middle Eastern theaters of war against Germany and the Axis powers. East Africa, Middle East, Britain was there. Even in the Far East, when Japan was doing their thing, Britain played a role against the Japanese. And then, of course, once we got involved, we fought alongside the British against the Axis powers. Got some more tools of the trade. Have another Enfield rifle right here, jungle carbine. We have, let's see, what's this piece right here? Japanese Taisho 8mm pistol. Let's see what this little gun is right here. Let's see, number 30. Australian Owen Mark 19 or Mark 1 9mm submachine gun. That's an interesting submachine gun. The magazine loads from the top, so it wasn't like they were trying to aim this thing precisely. They just wanted to shoot. Let's see, what's this piece? Beretta 1934 9mm pistol. Interesting. This little item right here, dead center, is a glass bottle that was melted at Hiroshima when the atom bombs went off. That would obviously not even be a testament to the power of the atom bomb. Japanese sword. Let's see what kind that one is. Let's see. Sword of General Itagaki Seishiro. Well, he presented his sword during the surrender. Of course, he was convicted of war crimes and executed. Well, do the crime, do the time. Of course, after World War II, a lot of the colonialism kind of slowed down some A lot of areas started going independent, going into the Cold War days. Had bigger things to worry about with the Russians, as they have titled in these displays, Withdrawal from Empire. I mean, they were still fighting and all, but little by little these colonies went independent, with just a overshadowing by the British Crown. But all in all, they were autonomous countries. Got us a cool view here of this helicopter suspended above the main floor, currently in the cafeteria, but found it an opportune time to get a shot of this helicopter. This helicopter is a Lynx Mark 9A helicopter used from 08 to 18, so it was just retired. But they were manufactured in 92 and saw service in Iraq in 09 before being converted to a Mark 9A, which this model is. Pretty cool. In this little section here, going to do a quick look at how the British Army played a role in Germany when Germany was a foe and then eventually became friend after Hitler was defeated. Once Hitler was defeated, peace was made. We could actually start rebuilding. Obviously, British and Americans occupied Germany. Of course, we also know the Russians occupied Germany too, and we had to split everything up between the two, hence the Berlin Wall, and of course the Cold War. And we know how that played out. Of course, even after the war, there were issues about relations with the defeated Germans, which would be understandable. I'm sure some Germans were probably happy that the whole war was over, as Hitler was more of a problem than a solution to some. But it's kind of hard to determine what you want to do, because you don't know if the people whose land you're occupying may become a problem later on. And again, as stated before, the Americans, British, the Western Allies, and the Russians, Soviets, they kind of had a shaky friendship, if you want to call it that. They were more like business associates more so than friends. And as a result, we all had to become a big presence in that area, moving supplies and troops to the area, just to kind of keep the Russians calm, because, well, what would it take for Stalin to just say, hey, they're gone, let's take all this stuff? What are they going to do? Beat us too? In 49, they set between 53 and 55,000 British Army personnel in the area. Really, you were in a case of martial law through the whole area as a result. Even with the Soviets in the area, we still want to try to at least keep the peace even between our once allied friends on the other side. Bricksmiths. Bricksmiths was based in Berlin in the British sector, and in a villa in Potsdam inside the Soviet zone. Of course, there's a Soviet equivalent based in the British zone in West Germany called Socksmiths. I guess you could almost look at them like embassies. Of course, got to kind of dig the car. Almost looks like a old Fairmont. Of course, even while we were sitting here trying to be friends with the Soviets, it doesn't mean we didn't stop spying on each other. There was a whole lot of spying. Hey, hence the beginning of the James Bond series. Of course, with the new roles that the military played, they had to become a little well versed in some new equipment. Everything from rocket launchers to different machine guns. Some of their old standbys like these Enfield rifles. Mini flare pyrotechnic pistol. Huh. Okay, that's not a rocket launcher. That is a Carl Gustav 84mm anti-tank recoilless rifle. Basically, it's like an artillery shell, but instead of it shooting like an artillery shell with the intense recoil, it just blows the shell out of the thing with the exhaust coming out of the back and the shell coming out of the other end. Equal and opposite reaction. Got a Browning 9mm. L1A1 self-loading rifle, semi-automatic rifle. 308 or 7.62 NATO. Sterling submachine gun right there. Of course, the SA-80 rifle, which was in the 90s, the new bullpup version. I always like the bullpup rifles, are nice and compact. Of course, during the time of the Cold War, there was also an issue with the Irish Republican Army, as stated before. Internal threats existed as well as external threats. The IRA was actually a thorn in Britain's side for some time, and if I'm not mistaken, to a lesser degree they still are. Of course, as the Cold War did come to an end and the Berlin Wall fell, and even Russia fell for that matter, and Germany became once again an autonomous country for all intents and purposes, the question arose of what's going to happen with British forces stationed in Germany. Well, obviously we fast forward to today and, well, they still play a role in the world theater. Between the Gulf War and then later on the Iraqi War, Afghanistan, going into the 2000s, the British still played a role in that theater. I guess with them being in Germany, it made it easier for them to get to where they needed to go in the Middle East a lot quicker than if they were still stationed in the homeland. And of course, as a result, British and German peoples intermingled more so once the scars of World War II were healed. But war is human nature. We're always going to fight one another and kill one another, unfortunately. So, the Army's still going to play a role in human existence. Interesting factoid. In 1945, you had almost 750,000 troops in the theater, 50K civil servants, no family members or local employees. Fast forward 10 years and the number of troops went down to a tenth. Then, same thing with the civil servants, that dropped. Of course, now family members could be brought in along with local employees because, well, it's a little safer. Fast forward to 85. The number of troops went down even more. Civil servants still stayed, but of course more family members than local employees. Well, the local employees dropped down a little bit, but more family members came in. Fast forward 10 years from there, 95, the troop forces dropped down by half once again. Civil servants went up some more. Family members dropped down. Even the local employees dropped down. Fast forward to 2020, everything dropped down in Germany now. Only got a handful of soldiers, civil servants, family members, and German employees. So, really, there's really no use for anybody in Germany at this point. The numbers dropped down to just a fistful of people in the modern day. Like the end of a chapter. As we stated before, when it comes to war, there's going to be injury, lots of injury. As a result, technology improves to help compensate for the excessive injury. In our case, prosthetics. Even the poor soldiers who fell victim to IEDs in the current conflicts and lost limbs, prosthetics, on account of our technology, came about to help these maimed soldiers regain some mobility and at least be able to function in a somewhat normal capacity. Some have made leaps and bounds, as a matter of fact, because of these prosthetics. Some of these poor guys might have had double amputations because of the injuries sustained from IEDs, but thanks to the prosthetics, they are back. And then, of course, physical therapy and other medical techniques come into play to help them recuperate their movement. But again, we're still needing to work on the PTSD, because no amount of physical technology upgrades is going to stop the mental toll that war and injury takes. So definitely got to work on that. And some of these folks have intense levels of PTSD. Unfortunately, some of these folks don't make it. Some of these folks end up succumbing to their own battles with PTSD. This poor guy here caught a gunshot wound to the face. Needed serious surgery, reconstructive surgery. But he is back, thanks to medical technological advancements. Of course, as a result of the injuries these people sustain, you also have to find roles for them to work around their disabilities and injuries. Can't repay these guys by just casting them aside. You got to find a role for them, whatever role that may be. If they can't do anything physical, find something for them. They got to be able to feel needed in life once again. So they pay the ultimate price, short of death. This poor guy here had severe head and brain injury from an RPG hitting his vehicle about a foot from his face. Not even a foot from his face. Needed serious surgery, but he did survive. He did lose a good portion of his brain, though, as a result. But he did survive, luckily. Thank God for that. It's a good statement right there. Rehabilitation ends when you are no longer susceptible to the shocks of your injury. Of course, for some, that might be a lifetime. Rehabilitation for me has been about learning to find new meaning, learning to find new purpose to my life, and finding a tribe, if you like, that I belong to again. Yeah. My wife, yeah. Without my wife's constant support and care, her love for anyone in recovery, that's pivotal, that those you love are with you. Yep. Like I say, these guys paid a hell of a price. So they definitely deserve a lot more than any one of us that did not play in these roles. So don't forget that whenever you do run across a veteran, especially one that has got some injury And just because they're walking around, that doesn't mean that they don't have an injury, because they could be fighting their own battle in their head with PTSD. Serious battle. Nothing like PTSD compared. I mean, you could lose a limb and still have your mind right, but you could be as healthy as an ox, and PTSD will take you down quicker than any limb loss. So yeah, we definitely need to work on the PTSD aspect of veteran care. We have here a FV-721 Fox Combat Recon vehicle, a wheeled vehicle. Kind of like an APC or an armored car, with the added bonus of a big gun. Not a anti-tank gun, but still something that'll play a secondary role. This would almost be synonymous to an M2 Bradley armored fighting vehicle. Pretty cool little setup. Yeah, we're pretty much through the museum right now. We've made our way through all the floors, all the areas. And as we've seen, military is not all full of glamour and playing with equipment and playing soldier and all that. There's a lot more seriousness to being in the military. Yeah, you can have fun shooting guns and flying helicopters and driving tanks and stuff, but there's a serious mental and physical toll being in the military can play on anyone, no matter how tough you think you might be. So whenever you see a soldier, don't take them for granted. Show them some love, because they definitely showed some love when they signed up to fight on the battlefield. So don't forget those guys and girls, because we got both sides playing in the military and suffering just the same. So again, show your military comrades some love. We're gonna get ready to get us something to eat, start making our way back to the hotel so we can start packing up to get ready to ride out. So until the next time, Improvisation Center is signing off. Hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notifications. We got more to come on this trip. Till then, I will catch you later. Well, looking for souvenirs, we stopped in Camden Town. This area is almost on par with Maxwell Street from the old days in Chicago. Just block after block of shop after shop after shop, restaurants, food places, you name it. It's all kinds of stuff around here. Like, one-stop shop. We got us a load of crap right here. Souvenir t-shirts and everything. So yeah, we're a few pounds lighter once again. So we're gonna get the hell out of here after we get a little something to eat from this little street vendor right here and get back on the train.